All right, hi everybody, Dr. Shug here. Today we are going to be talking about evaluating literature for your literature reviews. I really like this topic. I really like this chapter in the Galvan text because it kind of highlights techniques we used to use in sort of the pre-digital age before articles were available on PDF and you would just point and click and get the article. Back in the day we had to actually go to libraries, usually in the basement where they kept all the journals, photocopy journals, carry a whole stack home and then start sorting through them. And I do believe, honestly, that something has been lost since that time in terms of being able to organize your information and produce a highly organized quality literature review. Just sort of sorting through PDF files, looking at a computer screen, it can become overwhelming, and I think it's hard to see the big picture. So, the techniques we're going to talk about today are really designed to get you thinking big picture in terms of how you're organizing. So the starting point for this lecture, we're assuming that you've already found a fair amount of articles, or at least you started finding articles for your review. And what you're going to do now is you're going to start analyzing, what you're going to use, what you're not going to use, how you're going to weave everything together to tell the story of your literature review. At the end of this process, we'd really like to see you having a pretty decent draft of your reference list, and also, believe it or not, a set of note cards, of index cards that contain, specific detailed information about each article. Again, this is going to seem sort of old school and perhaps, not as high tech as you might like, but trust us, this technique really does work, and it certainly helps organize vast amounts of information more efficiently. Okay, pre-reading. So the idea behind pre-reading is an understanding that journal articles tend to have a lot of information in them. It's packed with information. It's often written in technical language. Reading them word for word from start to finish is just not economical. And I don't want to say it's a waste of your time, but it can certainly sidetrack you and keep you from reaching the final goal of your literature review. So pre-reading is basically, focusing on different spots within the articles to get the important information, really to tell you a if you need the article, if you can use it or not, and then b how you can weave it together with other articles. After reading the titles, it's important to skim through the abstracts. From there, reading the first few paragraphs of each article and where the author provides sort of a general introduction about the problem, and that'll give you a feel for the author's perspectives on the topic of study. Another good technique is after that to jump to the last paragraph of the introduction. And this is usually where the researchers will state their hypotheses, their research questions, the purpose for the research. It's really a good place to kind of see what's overall going to be going on in this particular article. Skim through the rest of the article, look at headings, subheadings. Don't read every word of every section. Just again, you're scanning, you're getting a flavor for overall what this article is about. It's an overview, and you can probably tell pretty quickly if it's an article you can use or not in your literature review. And if you can't, that's fine. Get rid of it. But at least you don't have to spend, more of your valuable time reading word for word an article that you're not going to use. All right, now here is where, again, we're hearkening back to the old school techniques of paper photocopies of journal articles sitting on your bed with stacks and stacks of these things. So um, I encourage you to print these out and then start stacking them in, according to categories. You can organize these in a few different ways. The most common practice is to go by topic and subtopic, thinking of an overall picture of how you're going to build your literature review and the sections that will comprise it. Here's an example of sort of a way to organize some literature on the effects of meditation. Have a look at this. And here's another one that, related to smoking cessation and menopause. Again, these topics might not be of interest to you, but look at the way they've been organized and picture in your mind how, the stacks of articles might be sort of sorted to reflect these different sections. Okay, so why do we sort articles? Well, it actually facilitates the way you can analyze and read the articles in each category and subcategory. And that's important because in all likelihood, your literature review will be comprised of different sections, sometimes of initially unrelated topics, which you will weave together toward the final sort of research question or hypothesis. But if you're reading an article about a topic and then you jump to another article about a different topic, your brain might have sort of a difficult time relating the two or even kind of getting into one or the other. So if you're reading a group of articles on the same topic, that's actually much more efficient. You're already kind of in the mode of absorbing and understanding that type of information, and can actually start formulating comparisons in your mind about how these articles relate to each other much more efficiently. So as we say here, for instance, it's easier to synthesize literature on the effects of weight gain during the menopausal transition if all the articles on this topic are read together, starting with the most recent one. That's very important. You do want to start with the most recent work done in an area and kind of work your way backward. Okay, guideline number 3, organizing yourself before reading articles. So this slide talks about having a computer, a pack of these, index cards. Some people use the little post-it notes to put on, photocopied articles. Whatever works for you. I'm really recommending personally the index card method, but all of these will work. Remember, if you're just using a computer or a computer monitor, you're really limiting yourself in terms of an overall understanding and the big picture. And actually, research studies have shown that our brains don't process digitally presented information in the same way that we do on a sort of a hard copy. I'm not sure I understand why that exactly is, and it might be just because your brain, when you're looking at a screen, is more focused on just a small amount of information, and what's not on the screen sort of is kind of taken for granted or even not even considered. But when you have, when you're able to hold, a piece of paper, there's that sort of tactile sensation, which is weaved together with the visual presentation of the words on the page, and so for some reason our brains do much better with that, and that's why I'm recommending that. So the self-sticking post-it notes, if you are limited to just a computer, or if you want to go that route, you can use the word processing functions related to highlighting using different colors. All right, guideline number 4, using a consistent format in your notes. So after you've organized the articles, start reading them, right? As you read them, you want to summarize the important points and write them down on note cards. I think this is really important. Reading should be an active process. It's much more efficient to make notes as you go while you're reading something rather than to read it and then try to figure out what you just read, particularly when you're reading these research articles. So come up with your own format for recording your notes about the articles as you read them, maybe typing notes on your computer, maybe writing them down on the index cards on a separate sheet of paper. Be consistent, because in the end, when you have a whole stack of these notes, you're going to want to know that you did them consistently and know exactly where to look for the information you're getting set to write about. Now, as has been talked about before, these studies tend to vary, sometimes even considerably, so you can sort of circumvent that variation by having your notes very concise and consistent in a method that makes sense to you. So here's an example of sort of a format that might work for you. Remember to note the page numbers and include quotation marks whenever you copy an author's words verbatim. So if you're going to be doing direct quotations, and I sort of recommend not doing direct quotations. Sometimes they are necessary though. But as you're reading through and writing these down or making note of them, definitely record the page number and the author who said them, because in the end, again, when you have a stack of these things that you're going back and trying to synthesize, you're not going to have to go searching through articles to figure out who said that initially. Work smarter, not harder. All right, here's an example of a format. So author's last name, initial, title of the article, the year it was published, the journal, and whatnot. On each card, this is a great idea if you're using index cards. Here's what you write down. First, what's the main point of the article? Second, what was the methodology used? Participants, controls, treatments, whatever. The third thing is the findings. Fourth, what is special about this article? What's noteworthy? Were there any flaws that you noticed? Is it experimental versus qualitative or quantitative? Just brief notes about that. And finally, noting specific details that you found especially relevant to the topic of your review. And this can be as long as necessary. But again, kind of getting this all down on an index card, which you'll then be manipulating later in terms of organizing the flow of your literature review, it's really important. So those are just examples. Of course, you might actually have to create a few different note cards per source. You might, for example, have one that relates to the main point, and then maybe another card that relates to the methodology. It might have it might be useful to have a separate card that makes notes or questions or concerns that you have about a particular article, any conclusions that you might reach. And these can all be incorporated into your literature review later, maybe in your discussion or your conclusion. Again, saving valuable time doing this as you go, using separate cards.